We begin our discussion on safety with a few definitions and a couple of examples. It is important that you understand these terms more conceptually, that you understand the terms in concept rather than by rote definition. And as such, I give you several definitions from several different sources so you can decipher those concepts. We're using a definition from the U.S. Air Force Handbook, the System Safety Handbook from your reading assignment this week, your Glissman text from the reading assignment this week. But the main thing that I want for you to understand here is that safety, or to be safe, is a relative term. Absolute safety is impossible. If you drive to work, you risk a car accident. If you ride your bike, you risk falling off. And if you walk to work, you risk getting hit by a car or a bicycle. If you decide to avoid risk altogether and not go to work, you risk obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes from sitting home on the couch all day. Our purpose here in system safety is to reduce the risk level as much as we can. In fact, we look at the benefits and the risk. The benefit of what we are trying to accomplish versus the risk of what it would take to get there. And our purpose in system safety is to ensure that the risk is reduced to a level that the benefits outweigh the risk. Moving on in our definitions, I wanted to talk about hazard. A hazard is a condition. It is not an action, it's a condition. It's a noun versus a verb. It's a condition that can lead to a mishap if triggered, but it needs to be triggered in order to lead to a mishap. So the hazard is a potential condition. For example, a mountain. A mountain can be hazardous to aircraft. Aircraft that are flying along could hit the mountain given certain circumstances, but the mountain itself would not cause a mishap. Triggering events would need to occur in order for the mountain to get in the way of the airplane and lead to that mishap. Likewise, explosives are a hazard, are hazardous, but they themselves do not cause a mishap. It's improper handling of the explosives that would cause a mishap, or improper environmental conditions that would cause those the gunpowder to be unstable or the explosives to be unstable. So the hazard is the potential condition. It's not the actual mishap itself. The understanding of that concept will be crucial as we go forward. Moving on now in definitions, the severity. So a hazard would be present. The safety engineer takes that hazard, determines what initiating events might cause a mishap, and if a mishap were to occur, what would be the severity of that? The severity then is the worst credible outcome, not the worst possible, but the worst credible outcome. So given the potential mishap and the resulting consequences, the engineer then must determine the likelihood. The likelihood is more specific to our conditions today, or our operation at this given time. What is the likelihood that the initiating events would line up to lead to a mishap? So we have the hazard, we have the initiating events that would lead to a mishap. What is the severity, the worst credible outcome, and then the likelihood specifically to our occasion, what is the likelihood that that might occur? The severity and likelihood combined lead to risk. Risk is a combination or the product of that severity of the mishap and the probability that the mishap will occur. Okay? Now let's talk about a quick example to see how this works. We talked about mountains being a hazard. Your presentation gives the example of mountains as hazards as well. And the consequences of hitting a mountain would continually be rated as catastrophic. That is, the consequences would be rated as catastrophic. That is, death and severe damage would undoubtedly occur if an aircraft were to run into a mountain. But the risk is not always high. The risk depends more upon your circumstances. The circumstances are defined in the likelihood. In other words, depending on your specific circumstances, the likelihood of hitting a mountain might be negligible. In an airliner, high above the mountains, what are the chances of hitting a mountain? They're very slim. the small aircraft that has to navigate the canyons and can't quite fly over the mountains raises the likelihood a little bit more. What if it's foggy? What if there's lower visibility? What if it's nighttime? All of those factors in your particular operation factor into the likelihood scenario, and the different circumstances of severity combined with likelihood result in varying levels of risk. Now, I like this concept very much. There's always a tension between production and protection. There's always a tension. It's like a tug of war between production, which is getting the job done, and protection, which is keeping people safe. Proverbs 14:4 states that where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. If there are no oxen, there is no risk. The manger is clean, but consequently, neither is there any production. There is no abundant crops. The manager has a solemn responsibility to ensure the safety and preservation of the company, the employees, the resources, and the environment. I prefer, rather than tension, I prefer to think of the balance between production and protection more of a balancing act. They work together if balanced properly. How, you may ask? Could safety and productivity balance? There's two different ends of the pendulum. If an organization operates to the exclusion of safety, it risks accidents and incidents that cost money, lost time, lost reputations. It causes bad stuff. And therefore, if an operation only focuses on production and not protection, it's to their detriment. On the other side of the pendulum, if the organization just is conscious of safety and doesn't do anything because it doesn't want to risk anything, it also risks financial ruin due to lost production. So there has to be a balance. Where's that balance? The balance is a term called ALARP, which is as low as reasonably practical. As low as reasonably practical means that you're below the intolerable risk level, and there's also the broadly accepted risk, and that's okay. But we at least want to get down to that line of tolerable risk. It's tolerable, it's where we're in balance, it's where the benefits outweigh the risk. Notice that ALARP is as low as practical. It's not as low as possible, but as low as practical. That is feasible. We reduce the risk as low as practical. I like this chart because it presents a picture of how the safety effort and cost relate to each other and why the safety process does not press to as low as possible, but stops at practical. So after hazard mitigation, the residual risk should be as low as reasonably practical, where the level of risk is tolerable and cannot be reduced further without disproportionate costs down in this area.